You're not abandoning your students by leaving teaching. You're abandoning yourself by staying. But you can't see that yet because the guilt is screaming so loud you can't hear anything else. Hey guys, I'm Keith and I have 14 years of classroom experience in multiple countries before I left to become a data analyst. And today, I'm going to tell you why that guilt is a trap and why you need to let go if you're ever going to get out. And to start, I need to tell you the story about Marcus. 2 weeks before I was supposed to end my J1 visa program, Marcus stayed after class. Marcus has been failing all year. Not because he was dumb, no. He was smart as hell when he tried. But he didn't try. He slept through lesson, didn't turn in work. One of those kids you eventually stop calling on because, they're just checked out. Then something shifted in April. I don't know what, to be honest. Maybe a conversation with a counselor, or maybe his situation at home changed. Or maybe he just woke up one day and decided to give a shit. But regardless, he suddenly starts staying after school, asking questions, turning in assignments. Not perfect work, but real effort. And by May, he was getting B's. So when he came up to me that day in late May and asked if I could help him with his final project, I should have been excited. This was a win, right? The breakthrough moment teachers live for. Instead, all I could think was, I'm leaving in 2 weeks and he doesn't know yet. That guilt hit me like a freight train. This kid finally cares. He finally trusted me enough to ask for help, and I'm about to bail on him. I spent those 2 weeks convinced I was making a mistake, that I was abandoning a student who needed me, that a good teacher wouldn't do this. And here's the open loop I'm going to pay off later. That guilt almost stopped me from leaving. And if it had, I'd still be teaching right now. Probably even more burned out. Definitely more resentful. So remember that. Let me tell you why you feel guilty. And it's not because you're a bad person. From day one of your teaching program, hell, from the moment you told people you wanted to be a teacher, you heard the same script. Oh, teaching is a calling, or you're going to change lives, or these kids are counting on you. And it's not entirely wrong. Some kids do need you. You probably are making a difference. But here's what they don't tell you. That narrative is also a control mechanism. Think about it. If teaching is a sacred calling, a moral obligation, then you can complain about the pay, right? Because you're not in it for the money. Or you can't set boundaries because good teachers do the extra mile. Or you can't leave because good teachers don't quit. And finally, you can't prioritize yourself because that's selfish. So see how that works? The guilt keeps you trapped because leaving doesn't just feel like changing jobs. It feels like moral failure. Like you're betraying the kids who need you. That's not an accident. That's by design. And the system needs you to feel guilty. Because if you didn't, you realize you're overworked, underpaid, and expected to solve problems that aren't your responsibility. That guilt isn't proof you're a bad person. It's proof that the system trained you well. Here's what the guilt is actually doing to you. And this is important, so stay with me. It's making you personally responsible for outcomes you have zero control over. Psychologists call this moral injury. It's what happens when you feel responsible for things you literally cannot fix. Soldiers experience this when they can't save everyone in their unit. ER doctors experience this when patients die despite their best efforts. And teachers? Teachers experience this constantly. When kid fails your class because they have zero support at home and they're working 30 hours a week to help pay rent, you feel guilty. Or when a student is struggling because they've been traumatized and they need therapy, not algebra. Again, you feel guilty. Or your class is chaotic because you have 35 kids, no aid, and half of them should be in special ed, but the school won't test them. You feel guilty. See what's happening? We're taking responsibility for systemic failures. And that's not guilt. That's a trap. And here's the part that makes me angry. The system is designed this way on purpose. Because if individual teachers feel personally responsible for structural problems, they're not blaming the people who actually created those problems. If you're up 2 a.m. thinking, what could I have done differently for that kid? You're not thinking, why does this school have 45 kids per counselor and a $200 annual budget for classroom supplies? The guilt redirects your anger from the system to yourself. And here's the kicker, the thing that took me years to accept, staying doesn't actually help the kids. You think it does, but it won't. You think if I just stuff it out one more year, if I just give a little more, maybe I can make a difference. But what actually happens? You stay, you give more, and you burn out harder. And eventually, you become the teacher who's physically present but emotionally gone. The teacher who's irritable, checked out, just counting down to retirement. And you know who notices? The kids. They can tell when you don't want to be there. They can feel your resentment. They know. So staying doesn't give them a dedicated teacher. It gives them a burnt out shell of a person who used to care but doesn't anymore. And how is that better? Okay, let's speed run the specific guilt questions that are probably running through your head right now. The first one is, but what about the kids who need me specifically? The harsh truth is, the school will replace you. Maybe not immediately, maybe not with someone as good as you, but they'll hire someone, and that person will care about the kids, or they wouldn't have become a teacher. You're not as essential as you think. And I don't mean that as an insult, I mean that as a liberation. But what if I'm the only stable adult in their life? Then the problem is bigger than you. One teacher cannot patch systemic poverty, abuse, neglect, and trauma. That's not your job. That's a societal failure that requires societal solutions. You can be kind, you can be present while you're there, but you cannot sacrifice your entire life trying to be the structural support for a building that's collapsing. But won't they feel abandoned? Maybe, for a week, maybe two. But they'll move on because kids are resilient and they adapt and they'll find other adults. You're not the only person who will ever care about them. So stop acting like you are. But what if the next teacher isn't as good? Not your problem, seriously. You cannot control who they hire. Maybe the next teacher will be worse. Or maybe they'll be better in ways you weren't. Maybe they'll connect with kids you couldn't reach. You don't get to know. And you don't get to control it. You can only control whether you stay in a job that is destroying you. But what if I regret leaving? You might, temporarily. For a few months, you might think, did I make a mistake? I know I did think that. But you know what you'll definitely regret? Staying in a job you hate for 20 years because you were too guilty to leave. That regret doesn't fade. That regret becomes your entire life. And you know what's wild to me? Doctors leave their patients all the time. They switch hospitals, they retire early, they move on to the next city. Nobody writes about, how doctors are abandoning their patients. Social workers as well, they change jobs. The therapists close their practice to focus on research. Nurses take travel contracts and work in different states or country every 6 months. But teachers? Oh, teachers are supposed to be lifers, right? You're supposed to stay in the same school, in the same district, teaching the same grade level for 30 years. And if you leave, you're selfish. You're a quitter. You didn't really care. Isn't that funny how the profession that pays the least is the one that demands the most moral purity? Almost like they're using your empathy against you. That's definitely weird. Also, and I'm just saying, the people who tell you it's not about the money, it's about the kids, are definitely collecting a paycheck. They're not volunteering, just throwing it out there. Okay, remember Marcus? The kid from the beginning? I spent 2 weeks feeling guilty. 2 weeks convinced I was making a mistake. 2 weeks thinking I can't leave now, not when he's finally trying. And then I told him. End of the day, last week of school. I pulled him aside and said, hey, I need to tell you something. I'm not coming back next year. And you know what he said? He didn't say, how could you? He didn't look hurt or betrayed. He just said, hey, congratulations, Mr. Kaitor. You deserve to be happy. And then he asked if I'd still help him with his final project before I leave, which I did. And that's it. That's the whole interaction. No drama, no abandonment, no you ruined my life narrative. Just understanding. from a 16-year-old kid who had more emotional maturity than I did. Turns out, I wasn't as essential as I thought, and the world didn't end. Marcus finished the year. I don't know if he passed. I don't know if the next teacher connected with him. I don't know how his life turned out. And I had to make peace with not knowing. Because that's the other thing they don't tell you. You'll never know how most of your students turn out. You'll teach thousands of kids over your career, and you'll only hear back from maybe 1% of them. The rest, you'll never know if you made a difference. You'll never know if they remembered you. You'll never know if that one conversation changed your life or if they forgot it by the next week. Teaching is an act of faith. You do your best and you hope it matters, but you don't get to see the results. And if you can make peace with not knowing, you know what happens to the kids you teach for a full year? You can make peace with not knowing what happens to them after you leave. Here's the real issue underneath all the guilt. You've tied your identity to being a teacher. And if teaching is who you are, then leaving feels like self-destruction. I get it. I was there. For 14 years, I was Mr. Kaitor, or Keith the teacher, or Sir Keith. That's how people introduced me. That's how I introduced myself. And that's how I thought about myself. So when people asked, what do? I didn't say I just teach. I said I'm a teacher. It was my identity, not just my job. And when I started thinking about leaving, it felt like I was erasing myself. Like I didn't know who I'd be if I wasn't a teacher. But here's the truth. Teaching is what you do, not who you are. You're not a teacher. You're a person who teaches. And when that stops working for you, when it starts destroying you, you can become a person who does something else. That doesn't erase your teaching experience. That doesn't mean my 14 years didn't matter. It just means you're allowed to evolve. I'm still the person I was when I was teaching. I'm just not carrying the weight of a broken system anymore. The kids I taught, most of them don't remember me. And that's okay. Because my job wasn't to be unforgettable. My job was to show up with integrity while I was there. And I did that for 14 years, through burnout, through resentment, through days when I didn't want to be there. I showed up. I did my best. And when I couldn't do it anymore, I left. And that's not failure. That's self-preservation. Look, I'm not going to lie to you and say the guilt disappears the moment you leave, because it doesn't. For months after I left, I thought about the students, wondered how they were doing, felt bad that I wasn't there for them. I'd see something on social media about Teacher Appreciation Week and feel this pang of something. Not regret exactly, but guilt. Like I'd abandoned a post I was supposed to be guarding. But eventually, and this took longer than I wanted it to, I realized something. The guilt wasn't protecting them. It was punishing me. And staying wouldn't have helped them. It would have just given them a teacher who was dying inside, who was bitter, who was resentful, who was checked out but still physically present. They didn't need that. And I didn't need to sacrifice myself to give it to them. So here's what I want you to understand. You're allowed to leave. You're allowed to prioritize your mental health over a job. You're allowed to stop carrying the weight of problems you didn't create and can't solve. The kids will be okay. Not because the system is great, it's not, but because kids adapt. They find other adults. They survive. Your leaving doesn't doom them. But staying in a job that's destroying you, that dooms you. And you matter. If you're stuck in the guilt right now and you need help working through it, not just the tactics of leaving, but the emotional shit that makes it so hard, I wrote a book. It's called The After Hours Teacher for exactly that moment. It's not about how to quit your job book. It's about the mind shift shifts that I needed to finally give myself permission to leave without feeling like a piece of shit. Links in the description if you want to check it out. But whether you read the book or not, I need you to hear this. The guilt doesn't mean you're doing the wrong thing. It just means you cared, and that's enough. You don't have to keep bleeding yourself dry to prove you're a good person. You already proved it for years. Now it's time to take care of yourself, and I'll see you on the next one.